My name is Vanessa. I'm 33. And 4 weeks ago, at my father's farewell gala, he handed me a gift wrapped in laughter, the kind that 200 strangers in tailored suits and silk gowns could all share, except it came at my expense. Picture the scene with me. Crystal chandeliers dripping light over a ballroom that smelled like champagne and old money. My father at the podium, microphone in hand, working the crowd like a man who'd spent his whole career selling things he didn't believe in. When he reached my name on his little mental list of family, his voice softened into that practiced warmth everyone else mistook for love. "And here's my daughter Vanessa," he said, smiling at me across the room. "Never finished her degree. Never really finished anything, if we're being honest. But she's loyal. She still shows up for the free dinners." The room laughed. All of it. Every table. I didn't cry. I didn't storm off. I lifted my glass instead, smiled back at him, and said just loud enough for the nearest microphone to catch it, "To you, Dad, and to the last time you'll ever get to see my face." Then I walked out, heels echoing against marble, and left 200 people sitting in a silence so total you could have heard a heartbeat. What happened after that night is the story I want to tell you. Stay with me, it gets better and it gets worse before it gets good. Before we go further back, a quick favor. If this story is pulling you in, tap subscribe, only if you actually want to follow where it leads, and tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from tonight. Now let's rewind. 12 years, to be exact, to the day my future got rewritten by someone else's pen. We were the Whitfields of Greenwich. On paper, we had it all. My father, Edward Whitfield, ran a regional shipping and freight company that had been profitable for 3 generations. We lived in a sprawling stone house with a wraparound porch, 2 luxury sedans in the driveway, and a standing reservation at the kind of club where membership mattered more than character. My mother died when I was 9. An aggressive illness that moved faster than any of us could process. I have fragments of her left, the smell of her perfume, the way she hummed while cooking, but her face has blurred with time unless I look at photographs. Within 18 months, my father remarried. Camille arrived with a teenage son, Tobias, 2 years older than me, and from the moment they moved in, the house reorganized itself around them. I wasn't pushed out cruelly. There was no overt villainy, no dramatic abuse to point to later. Just a slow, quiet erasure. Tobias got praised for grades he barely earned. Mine were filed away unread. Tobias got a brand new car the week he turned 16. I inherited his old one 2 years later, dents and all. Tobias was the future of the company. I was simply present. My father never raised his voice at me. He didn't need to. He developed a talent for looking through people instead of at them, and I had become something he looked through daily. There was exactly one person who refused to do that. My grandmother, Eleanor Whitfield, my father's mother, called me every single Sunday without fail. She asked about my classes, my friendships, the things I dreamed about doing with my life. "You've got fire in you that nobody else in this family bothered to notice," she told me once. "I see it. I always have." She left me something when she passed. Something nobody else in the family would learn about for years. But I'm getting ahead of the story. In that house, I mastered invisibility as a survival skill. I had no idea yet that it would eventually become the sharpest weapon I'd ever own. The day my future got handed to someone else, I was 20 years old, a junior at a respected university, business and economics double major, carrying a GPA I was proud of, and an acceptance letter to a summer fellowship abroad sitting unopened on my desk because I wanted to savor it a little longer. My father called and said 3 words I'd come to dread: "Family meeting tonight." I found him behind his enormous desk, Camille standing at his shoulder like a co-signer on whatever verdict was coming. "Vanessa," he began, not even looking up from his paperwork, "the company's tight on cash this year. We have to make choices." I already knew. I'd learned to read the room before he finished a sentence. "Tobias got into a top-tier MBA program," he continued. "It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for the business. We can't fund both his program and your tuition right now. So you're going to take some time off from school. Just for a season. Camille added her own touch, syrupy and final. A degree isn't really necessary for a girl like you, sweetheart. You'll find a good husband. That's what truly matters in the end. I sat there, strangely calm, because some smaller, more stubborn part of me had still believed, right up until that moment, that he might choose differently. You promised me, I said quietly. You told Mom you'd make sure I finished. His jaw tightened. Things change, Vanessa. Once the company stabilizes, I'll make it right. He never did. Years later, a careless comment from a cousin revealed the truth. There had been plenty of money. They simply decided I wasn't worth spending it on. I didn't argue that night. I nodded, swallowed it whole, and made myself one private promise. Nobody would ever again get to decide what I was worth. I left for the city with less than $3,000 and a suitcase that didn't match the life I was walking away from. My first apartment was a cramped studio above a dry cleaner, where the pipes groaned all night and you could hear your neighbor's television through the walls like it was playing in your own living room. I lived on instant noodles and day-old pastries from the bakery where I worked mornings. But there's a strange gift hidden inside rock bottom. Once you're there, there's nowhere left to fall. I took a job as an office assistant at a small freight logistics firm. Entry level. The owner, a blunt, weathered man named Harold Mercer, saw something in me nobody in my own family had bothered to look for. You've got a sharp mind, kid, he told me once. Don't waste it. So I didn't. I stayed late. I absorbed every system, every spreadsheet, every operational detail I could get my hands on. At night, I devoured free online coursework, logistics, operations management, finance, until those courses became the only college education I needed. I never called home. I never asked for a single dollar. When a birthday card arrived one year with a small check tucked inside, sent more out of obligation than love, I tore it in half and threw it away. 4 years after leaving, I had saved enough to start my own firm, Northbridge Consulting. Just me, a laptop, and a desk rented by the month. I kept my name scrubbed from anything public. No social profiles tied to the business, no press, nothing that could trace back to Vanessa Whitfield. Every contract ran through legal representatives and account managers. Why the secrecy? Because I knew exactly what my family would do with my success, take credit for it, or find a way to tear it apart. Some people build their empire loudly. I built mine in total silence, because silence was the only language that house had ever taught me fluently. My grandmother passed when I was 31. I flew back for the funeral and sat in the last pew, listening to my father deliver a eulogy about a woman devoted entirely to family, the irony so thick it nearly choked me. At the reception, nobody noticed I was there, which suited me fine. 3 days later, my phone rang. A lawyer I'd never heard of, Margaret Sinclair, from a firm specializing in trusts and estates. Ms. Whitfield, I represent your grandmother's private estate. She established a trust in your name 9 years ago, with explicit instructions that no other family member ever be told it existed. I nearly dropped the phone. The trust held just over $900,000. There was also a letter. She knew exactly what they did to you, Eleanor's words read, in that lawyer's careful voice. I fought your father on the tuition until I had no fight left in me. He never listens. He never has. This money is yours, with no conditions attached. Build the life they tried to take from you. And remember what I always told you, don't you dare let anyone convince you that you're not worthy. By the time they finally see it, it will be far too late for them to matter. I used part of that money to grow Northbridge. The rest I kept in reserve, insurance for a day I hoped would never come, but somewhere deep down, always suspected I'd need. That day arrived 4 weeks ago. Let me tell you what Northbridge Consulting looks like today. 18 employees, a downtown office with a skyline view, and a client list that took years of quiet, careful work to build. I wear good clothes now, not to impress anyone, but because every thread of it I paid for myself. We specialize in supply chain optimization, unglamorous work, but profitable, and I happen to be very good at it. Here's the detail that still makes me laugh in that bitter, ironic way. One of our largest clients is Whitfield Freight, my father's company. They signed a 5-year service agreement with us 3 years ago. We handle their routing, warehouse efficiency, and carrier negotiations, work that accounts for nearly 40% of their operational savings. My father has no idea. Every communication goes through my team. Every contract is signed by my chief financial officer, a sharp, loyal man named Marcus Reyes. The few times my father has bragged about Northbridge at industry dinners, calling them the smartest consultants in the business, he's been praising his own daughter without knowing it, the same daughter he once called a freeloader. 4 weeks ago, an invitation arrived. Gold lettering. Edward Whitfield requests your presence at his retirement celebration. I almost tossed it. Almost. But then I thought of my grandmother, of 12 years of broken promises and closed doors, and I RSVP'd yes. Not for reconciliation, not out of hope that anything had changed, but because some part of me knew with absolute certainty he was about to do something unforgivable, and I wanted to witness it on my own terms. I had no idea just how right that instinct would turn out to be. The country club hadn't changed in 30 years. Same overdone chandeliers, same valets who looked down their noses at anyone driving something under 6 figures, same crowd pretending old money and new money mixed comfortably. I wore black, simple, expensive, my grandmother's pearl earrings at my ears, a watch and bag I'd bought with my own money. That detail mattered more to me than any label ever could. Camille intercepted me at the door, older now but with the same calculating smile.
Vanessa,
you actually came. Her eyes swept over my outfit, doing quiet inventory. Your father wondered if you'd own anything appropriate. How thoughtful of him to worry, I said and walked past her. Inside, 200 guests drifted beneath the lights, bankers, executives, old family friends I half recognized. None of them recognized me. Tobias swept by with a woman on his arm, deep in conversation about his vision for the company's future, not even glancing my way. Classic Tobias, all polish, no substance. My table assignment put me at the back, near the kitchen doors, seated with distant acquaintances I'd never met. Not the family table. Not close. I wasn't surprised. I simply noted it, the way you note weather before a storm. A waiter offered champagne, top shelf, naturally, nothing but the best for Edward Whitfield's big night. I took a glass. Across the room, my father caught my eye, gave a single dismissive nod, and turned back to people who actually mattered to him. The night was only beginning, and I had a front-row seat to exactly how little I meant to my own family. I've learned that the best intelligence comes from staying quiet and listening carefully. From my corner table, I did exactly that. The acoustics in that ballroom carried voices farther than people realized. My father held court near the bar, deep in conversation with a silver-haired shipping executive. Northbridge Consulting has been transformative for us, he was saying. They're the backbone of our entire operation now. Whoever's running that company is a genius. I've been trying to get a meeting with them for months, the other man replied. Do you even know who's behind it? My father shrugged. Never met them personally. Everything runs through their legal team. Honestly, I don't care who they are as long as the results keep coming. I sipped my champagne to hide my smile. My phone buzzed, a text from Marcus, my CFO. Renewal documents from Whitfield Freight came in today. They're asking for another 5 years. Need your call. I typed back, I'll have an answer by end of week. What my father didn't know, what nobody in that glittering room knew, was that our contract with his company was up for renewal, and if Northbridge walked away, Whitfield Freight would lose nearly half its operational efficiency almost overnight. In this industry, that's not an inconvenience. That's a death sentence. I hadn't decided what to do yet. Part of me wanted to keep business and personal pain in separate boxes. But watching my father glow under praise for success partly built on my own work he'd spent years pretending I was incapable of, something in my chest shifted, cold and certain. Tonight would decide everything. I just didn't know it yet. At the bar, I ran into the extended family's welcoming committee. Camille's younger sister, Renata, spotted me first, her face cycling through surprise, pity, and condescension in record time.
Vanessa!
I almost didn't recognize you. Her eyes dragged over my outfit. Still up north, doing whatever it is you do? Consulting, I said. Supply chain. How nice, she said, in the exact tone people use for hobbies they find slightly embarrassing. Seeing anyone? Your father mentioned you're still single. 33 now, isn't it? Time really does fly. Before I could answer, her husband chimed in. Edward says you're still figuring things out. Nothing wrong with being a late bloomer. Not everyone's built for traditional success. I understood instantly. My father had briefed the room, given them a script, set the narrative before I'd even walked through the doors. He mentioned you had some difficulties after leaving school, Renata said, lowering her voice like she was sharing a delicious secret. Mental health struggles. So brave of you to show up tonight, honestly. My grip tightened around the glass, not from hurt, but from sheer disbelief at the audacity. I appreciate the concern, I said evenly. But I'm doing better than I've ever been in my life. They exchanged a look, the kind that says poor thing doesn't even realize how far she's fallen. I excused myself before I said something I couldn't take back. But by then, a plan was already forming, cold and clear and inevitable. Tobias found me on the terrace, staring out at the dark fairway, the September air sharp against my skin. Well, well, he said from behind me, dripping with contempt. The prodigal daughter returns. I didn't turn around. Tobias! He stepped closer, his cologne expensive and suffocating. Dad's about to give his speech. Just making sure you're not planning a scene. Why would I do that? Because you've always been jealous. He said it like established fact. The way you disappeared after the tuition thing, ran off like some wounded animal. You never got over it. I turned to face him, his tailored suit, his watch, his perfectly styled hair, all paid for by a company he barely understood. Is that what helps you sleep at night? His eyes hardened. I heard you started some little company, playing businesswoman. He laughed, short and cruel. How long before it folds? A year. Then you'll come crawling back, begging Dad for a handout. I won't. You will. You always do. You're weak, Vanessa. You always have been. I could have told him right then, about Northbridge, about the contract, about how his precious company's survival depended on the sister he'd spent years dismissing. But some truths need the right stage. Believe whatever helps you sleep, Tobias, I said, walking past him. But I promise you, after tonight, you're going to wish you'd treated me differently. His laughter followed me back inside, careless and arrogant. He had no idea what was coming. None of them did. The lights dimmed. A spotlight found the stage. My father climbed the steps to thunderous applause, the conquering hero of Connecticut freight, taking his final bow. Thank you, he said, voice dripping with that practiced warmth he'd spent decades perfecting. 38 years in this business. What a ride. Laughter. More applause. He thanked partners, employees, mentors, luck, fate, taking credit for nearly everything in his path. Then came the family segment. None of this would have been possible without my incredible wife, Camille. He gestured toward her table. 30 years of putting up with my late nights. You're a saint. Camille dabbed at her eyes, perfectly on cue. And my son, Tobias, who's stepping in as CEO come January. The future of this company. I couldn't be prouder. Standing ovation. Tobias rose, waving like royalty. Then my father's eyes found mine, and something shifted in his expression, something almost cruel. And of course, my daughter, Vanessa. The spotlight swung toward me. 200 pairs of eyes followed it. No degree, no real career to speak of. Just here for the free dinners, mostly. He paused for effect. But hey, at least she showed up tonight. Maybe one day she'll find a husband to take care of her. The room erupted. Real laughter. The kind that comes from people who believe they're in on a joke, never realizing they're watching cruelty dressed up as comedy. I sat perfectly still. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I waited for the laughter to die down completely. Then I stood. The room went quiet as I rose, every eye on me, some curious, some pitying, some already bracing to watch the family disappointment finally crack under her father's harmless little joke. I lifted my glass slowly, deliberately. I saw my father's smile falter, just slightly. He hadn't expected this. I was supposed to sit there and absorb it like I always had. "Congratulations on your retirement, Dad," I said, my voice carrying clean and steady through the silent ballroom. 38 years. Quite an achievement. I let the pause stretch. You taught me a great deal about hard work, about sacrifice, and about exactly how much loyalty this family is capable of. The silence was absolute. Someone's ice clinked against glass 3 tables away. "So here's to you." I raised the glass higher. "Cheers. This is the last time any of you will ever see me." I set the glass down without drinking from it, picked up my bag, and walked toward the exit, my heels striking the hardwood floor, the only sound in that entire cavernous room. I didn't rush. Spine straight, head high. Behind me, total, devastating silence. Someone gasped. Someone whispered something I didn't catch. Mostly there was just the echo of my own footsteps and 200 people trying to process what they'd just witnessed. The daughter who was supposed to break had just walked out on her own terms. I pushed through the doors and stepped into the cool night air, and for the first time in 12 years, I could actually breathe. I was almost to my car when I heard footsteps slapping the pavement behind me. "Vanessa! Vanessa, stop right there." Camille's voice, sharp and furious. I kept walking. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" She grabbed my arm, spinning me around, her composure cracked wide open. "You humiliated your father in front of everyone he knows." I looked at her hand until she removed it. "I humiliated him? I think you have that backwards." My father appeared behind her, his face a thundercloud, fully aware that 200 guests were probably watching from the windows. "Get back inside," he said, low and dangerous. "Apologize. Now." "No. This isn't a negotiation. I'm your father, and I'm telling you." "You're telling me what?" I cut him off, something I had never once done in my life. "That I should go back in there and keep letting you use me as your punchline? Smile while you call me worthless in front of 200 people. It was a joke. It was the truth of how you see me, and I'm done pretending otherwise." I opened my car door. My father stepped forward, voice hardening. "If you leave right now, you're finished. No family. No support. Nothing." I almost laughed. "Dad, you cut me off 12 years ago. You just never had the nerve to say it out loud." I slid into the driver's seat. "Tonight, I'm saying it for both of us." I started the engine. "Goodbye." And I drove away. About 20 minutes outside Greenwich, I pulled into a rest stop and sat there, engine idling, hands still gripping the wheel, just breathing. Let me step outside the story for a second. I know some of you watching have lived through something close to this, maybe not 200 witnesses, maybe not a country club, but that exact feeling of being the family's quiet disappointment, the one talked about in hushed tones, the one whose success nobody bothered to notice. If you've ever smiled through pain because making a scene would only prove them right, I think you understand exactly what I felt sitting in that parking lot. If any part of this is landing with you, drop a comment and tell me your story, or just let me know you're here. It helps more than you'd think to know I'm not the only one. And if you want to know what happens next, because the next part changes everything, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. Back to the story. I woke the next morning in my apartment feeling lighter than I had in years, but I knew it wasn't over. Families like mine don't let go quietly. They rewrite the narrative. They make themselves the victims. What they didn't know was that I held something they couldn't spin their way out of. The week that followed started with text messages, not from my father, who was far too proud for that, but from cousins and family friends I hadn't spoken to in years, suddenly deeply concerned about my mental state. Heard about what happened. Your dad says you're struggling. Renata told me you had some kind of episode. Your father loves you. He just wants what's best. Maybe you should apologize and come home. The story was already being written. Poor, unstable Vanessa, having some kind of breakdown, and patient, long-suffering Edward, just trying his best with a troubled daughter. I answered none of them. Then came the more interesting call. A Connecticut number I didn't recognize. Tuesday afternoon. Ms. Whitfield, this is James Calloway, a partner at Whitfield Freight. I'm calling on Edward's behalf. He'd like to discuss mending fences. Between you and me, he continued smoothly, there's been some interesting chatter about your connection to certain business partners. Probably nothing. I went cold. What kind of chatter? Something about Northbridge Consulting. Someone thought they spotted you at their offices once. I'm sure it's a misunderstanding. My mind raced. They were getting close. I don't know what you're referring to, I said. Tell my father I have nothing to discuss with him. I hung up. It was time to stop waiting and start acting. While I fielded concerned texts from a city away, my father was facing a very different kind of crisis back home. I learned the details much later. He'd walked into what should have been a routine quarterly meeting. Instead, his CFO looked like he'd seen a ghost. We have a problem with Northbridge, the CFO said, sliding a folder across the table. Their contract's up for renewal in 6 months. They haven't responded to our extension offer. So send another one. Sweeten the terms. We've tried 3 times. Their legal team just says, under review. Then call their executives directly. We've tried that too. The CFO shifted uncomfortably. Sir, Northbridge is intensely private. No one's ever actually met their leadership. It's all virtual, legal reps, account managers. Nobody at this company has ever sat across from the actual owner. My father's frown deepened. Someone must have met with them at some point. No, sir. A long silence settled over the room. If they walk, the CFO said carefully, we lose nearly 40% of our operational efficiency overnight. Replacing that takes at least 18 months. Optimistically. I know what it means, my father snapped, staring at the folder, something nagging at the back of his mind. The timing, the silence, all of it happening right after that party. I want a name by end of week. I don't care what it takes. What he didn't know, what he was about to discover, was that the name he was searching for had been sitting on his family tree the entire time. Thursday evening, my phone rang again. Camille. I almost let it go to voicemail, but curiosity won. Vanessa, sweetheart. Her voice was honeyed, performed to perfection. I've been so worried about you. Have you? Of course. That's what family does. A soft laugh, like we were sharing some private joke. Listen, about the party. Your father feels terrible. He didn't mean any of it. He gets nervous, tries to be funny, says things he doesn't mean.
You know how he is.
He told 200 people I had no future. He exaggerates when he's anxious, she pressed on. Why don't you come home this weekend? Dinner, just the four of us. We can clear the air. I could picture her in that pristine living room, rehearsing every line, deciding exactly which buttons to press. Does Dad want to apologize? A slight hesitation. He wants to move forward. Isn't that what matters?
So, no apology.
Don't be difficult, Vanessa. We're trying to help you. Help me.
Now.
I almost laughed. Camille, you spent 23 years making absolutely sure I knew I wasn't really part of this family. And now you're calling to help me.
Why?
A longer pause this time. I think we both know there's more going on here than just family drama, she said finally, her warmth dropping away. Whatever you're planning, and I know you're planning something, it would be a lot better for everyone if you just came home and talked it through.
No.
I hung up before she could respond. They knew something was coming. They just didn't yet know how much to fear. The next morning I drove to Margaret Sinclair's office downtown. Sleek glass and steel, skyline views, the kind of place where serious decisions got made over coffee that cost more than my first month's rent. I assumed this is about Whitfield Freight, she said when I walked in. They're trying to find out who owns Northbridge. Your anonymity was always going to be temporary, she added, unsurprised. The only question is how you want this to unfold. She spread the relevant documents across her desk, the original contract, every renewal clause, every exit provision, the trust paperwork, the incorporation records. Standard 30-day termination notice, she said, tapping the relevant page. You can end the agreement for any reason. No penalties, no exposure. She slid another folder toward me. Your grandmother's trust is entirely separate from the Whitfield estate, legally untouchable, even if your father tried to contest it.
She made absolutely sure of that.
She looked at me over her glasses. Eleanor told me once, one day, Vanessa is going to need leverage. When that day comes, I want her to have it. I felt my eyes sting. My grandmother, protecting me even from the grave. She also said something else, Margaret added. Tell her not to be cruel about it. Just be honest. Sometimes the truth is punishment enough. I nodded. The truth, then. That afternoon, I sat down with Marcus, my CFO, in our conference room. He'd been with me since year 2. He knew everything about my family, about Whitfield Freight, about exactly why I'd kept my name off the paperwork. They want to renew, he said, scrolling through his tablet. 5 more years, 12% above current terms. They're nervous. They should be. I pulled up the projections on the screen. The numbers told a brutal story. If we walked, Whitfield Freight would lose nearly 40% of its operational efficiency within 60 days. Not a dip. A free fall. Tobias just took over as CEO, Marcus said. If this hits during his first quarter, his reputation is finished before it even starts. We sat with that for a moment. It felt almost surreal, holding this much power over people who'd spent decades making sure I felt powerless. What do you want to do? He asked. I've been thinking about it for days, about my grandmother's words, about the difference between revenge and truth, about who I actually wanted to become. Draft the termination letter, I said finally. 30-day notice, per the contract. No accusations. Just business. Reason given. Strategic repositioning.
That's all they need officially. And the rest.
I'm writing a personal letter to my father. Separate envelope. He deserves to know exactly whose work he's been living off, and exactly why it's ending. When do you want to send it? Monday. First thing. No more waiting. I spent all of Sunday on that letter. Marcus handled the legal language for the official notice. I wrote the personal one, the truth, stripped of everything else. I went through 6 drafts. The first was pure rage, pages of accusations. The second was too cold, too clinical. The final version was simple, clean, factual. Dad, you told 200 people I had no future. I want you to know something now. The company you call the backbone of Whitfield Freight is mine. I built it. I own it. For 3 years, the daughter you wrote off has been holding your business together. I'm ending the contract, not as revenge, but as a boundary. Grandma Eleanor left me a trust you never knew existed, because she saw something in me you refused to. Everything I have, I built myself, with her faith and without your help. I don't need an apology. I don't need you to understand. I just need you to know I was never what you said I was. I never will be. Don't contact me again. Vanessa Eleanor Whitfield. I'd added my middle name 3 years earlier, in honor of the only person in my family who ever truly believed in me. I included a copy of Northbridge's incorporation papers, my name listed clearly as sole owner. I read it 3 times, checking for excess emotion. Found none. Just the truth, sometimes the most devastating weapon there is. Monday, 9 a.m. delivery confirmation. The package had reached Whitfield Freight headquarters, signed for by my father's longtime assistant. I sat at my desk, watching my phone. 10:15. Missed call from Dad. 10:23. Missed call from Tobias. 10:31. Missed call from Camille. 11:02. Call me. Now. 11:15. What the hell is this? 11:34. Vanessa, this isn't funny. Pick up. By noon I had a dozen missed calls and 8 texts I never opened. I'd waited 12 years for this moment. They could wait a few more hours. At 2 p.m., my assistant knocked. There's a family in the lobby. They're saying it's urgent. They'd driven the entire way, hours of traffic and panic just to confront me in person. I checked my reflection, straightened my blazer, and breathed. Send them to conference room B, I said.
I'll be down in 5.
This was the conversation I'd imagined 1,000 times, finally arriving without warning. Conference room B had glass walls, chosen deliberately. My employees could see in, though not hear. Witnesses, not for humiliation, but to keep the room civil. My father, Camille, and Tobias stood clustered by the window, staring out at a skyline they'd never expected to see from this angle, from my territory. My father turned as I entered. His face had gone gray, older than I'd ever seen it.
Vanessa.
His voice cracked on my name. Hello, Dad. Camille.
Tobias.
I took the seat at the head of the table. I assume you got my letter.
Your letter.
Tobias jabbed a finger toward me, half rising. You can't just. Sit down, Tobias. My voice stayed quiet, but firm.
I won't discuss anything with you, shouting across the table.
He glanced at my father, uncertain. My father nodded sharply, and Tobias sat. A long silence. This is all some kind of mistake, my father said finally, leaning forward. What part? Northbridge Consulting. You can't possibly, a company like that. You didn't. I did. I slid a folder across the table. Registration, filings, full client list. 3 years ago, your company signed a contract with mine. You called us transformative at industry dinners. You just never realized you were praising me. Camille had gone pale. But you don't even have a degree. You were just. A what, Camille? A disappointment? A failure? I shook my head slowly. I was a 20-year-old told to sacrifice her entire future. I built something anyway. Silence again. My father stared at the documents like they might catch fire under his gaze. Okay, he said finally, the corporate composure straining. I apologize. About the party. Is that what you want? I'm sorry. Now, can we talk about the contract? You're sorry because you need something from me.
That's not an apology. For God's sake, Vanessa.
Tobias slammed his hand on the table, vein pulsing in his neck. Do you understand what happens if you pull this contract? People lose jobs because of your petty revenge.
It isn't revenge. It's a business decision.
You've been planning this for years, he spat. Waiting to destroy us. This is sick.
I planned nothing, I said evenly.
I built a company. Your company chose to depend on mine.
That's not my fault.
You could have told us, Camille interjected, voice climbing.
You could have said something.
When? When you told me I didn't need an education because I'd just find a husband. When you spread rumors about my mental health to anyone who'd listen. She had no answer. I turned to my father. You want to know the worst part, Dad? I would have kept the contract running. I had no plan to do any of this.
But then you stood in front of 200 people and called me worthless.
I paused. You chose this.
Not me.
His jaw worked silently. For one brief moment, I thought I saw something like recognition flicker behind his eyes, something close to understanding. Then it vanished. What do you want? He asked flatly.
Nothing you have to give.
There has to be something. You're not listening. I don't want anything from you.
I never did.
Fine. His voice went cold, the vulnerability gone, replaced by the steel I'd known my whole life. If that's how you want this, you're done with this family. No inheritance.
Nothing.
I nearly laughed. Dad, you cut me off when I was 20. What inheritance? I could make things very difficult for you. I have lawyers.
Connections. On what grounds?
I leaned forward. Every document here is legal. Every contract signed in good faith.
There's nothing you can sue me for, and we both know it.
He glared.
Don't be so sure.
I am sure. Because my lawyer, who also happened to be Grandma Eleanor's lawyer, has already reviewed every possible angle. I let that settle. Remember Margaret Sinclair? She used her specifically because Eleanor knew you'd try something like this eventually. Camille gasped softly.
Eleanor knew about all of this?
She left me a trust. $900,000, structured so you could never touch it. I produced a copy of the trust document. She knew exactly what kind of family she'd raised. That's why she protected me from it. My father's face drained from red to white.
She had no right.
It was her money.
She had every right.
I stood.
This meeting is over. Vanessa, we're not done.
I am. I walked toward the door, then stopped. One more thing. If you contact me again, calls, texts, showing up at my office, I'll release every email, every document, every record of how this family has treated me. All of it legal. All of it backed up. And all of it would make a fascinating story for the business press. I opened the door. My receptionist will show you out. I stood there a moment, watching them gather themselves. 3 people who'd spent my entire life making me feel small, now looking remarkably small themselves. My father rose like an old man suddenly aware of his age. Camille clutched her bag like a shield. Tobias stared at me with something new in his expression, not contempt anymore. Fear. This isn't over, he said. Yes, it is. I meant every word. I spent 12 years building a life you all swore I couldn't have. I did it without your help, your approval, or your permission.
And I'll keep doing it without any of you.
Camille's lip trembled, the performance of motherly concern, one last time. Vanessa, please.
We're family.
We share blood, Camille. That's all we share. I held the door open wider. I'm not asking for an apology. I'm not asking for reconciliation. I'm setting a boundary. Don't contact me again. Don't mention my name to your friends or colleagues. Just let me go. My father paused in front of me. For a moment we simply looked at each other. Father and daughter, strangers who happened to share a last name. You really hate us that much? He asked, barely above a whisper. No, Dad. I don't hate you. That's the part you don't understand. I held his gaze. I just don't need you anymore. And that's something you're going to have to learn to live with. He had no response. They walked out through the lobby, past employees who carefully pretended not to watch, and the glass doors closed behind them. I went back to my desk, opened my laptop, and got back to work. Let me pause again here. If you're still with me, thank you. This part isn't easy to tell, and knowing you're listening means more than I can say. If you think this is where it ends, it isn't. The fallout rippled further than I ever expected. I thought I was just protecting my peace. I didn't anticipate what would happen to Whitfield Freight, or to my father's name, or to the family secrets that would eventually come spilling out once people started talking. If this story has made you think about your own boundaries, your own worth, hit that like button. It genuinely helps. Subscribe if you haven't, turn on notifications, because the ending is messy, complicated, and it taught me something about revenge I never expected to learn. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to walk away from family? Did it feel like freedom, or grief, or both? I read every single one. Back to the story. 1 week after that meeting, I got a call from someone I hadn't spoken to in over a decade. My Uncle Theo, my father's younger brother, the family's perpetual black sheep, the artist who never went into the business. I hadn't seen him since my mother's funeral.
Vanessa. His voice rougher than I remembered.
I heard about the party. About the office. Word travels fast around here. He paused. There's something you should know. Something I should have told you years ago, but I was too much of a coward. I sat down slowly.
I'm listening.
When your father said the family couldn't afford both your tuition and Tobias's program, that was a lie. There was money. There was a specific fund. Your mother set it up before she died, enough to cover 4 full years anywhere you wanted to go. My heart stopped. Your father drained it, used it for Tobias's MBA, then told you there was nothing left. The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the edge of my desk.
Why didn't you tell me?
Because I was scared of him. We all were. He exhaled slowly. Your grandmother found out. That's why she set up your trust. She couldn't get your mother's money back, but she made sure he'd never take anything else from you again. I thought of Eleanor's letter. I know what they did to you. She'd known the whole time.
Why tell me now?
Because it's time the truth came out.
All of it.
2 months after I terminated the contract, the consequences became impossible to hide. I wasn't actively tracking Whitfield Freight's collapse. Honestly, I was trying to move forward, but in that business community, bad news travels fast. The company announced a major workforce reduction right before the holidays. The press release blamed market conditions and restructuring. Everyone in the industry knew the real story. Their biggest consulting partner had walked, and they couldn't absorb the loss. Tobias, barely 3 months into his role as CEO, was already fielding hard questions from the board. The vision he'd promised was crumbling under the weight of his father's own bridges, burned long before he ever took the helm. My father came out of retirement to help manage the crisis. The triumphant exit he'd planned, the legacy he thought he'd secured, was unraveling in real time. The real damage was to their name. 200 people had watched him humiliate his own daughter at that party. When word eventually got around that the same daughter had quietly been keeping his company afloat for years, the whispers started. Did you hear about Edward Whitfield? mocked his own daughter publicly. Turns out she was the reason his company survived this long. Always thought something was off about that family. I didn't feel triumphant hearing any of it. I didn't feel satisfied either. Mostly, I just felt tired. My grandmother had been right all along. Sometimes the truth really is punishment enough. I didn't have to do anything further. It finished itself. 6 months later, I sat in a therapist's office, not because I was falling apart, but because I was finally ready to put the pieces back together properly. "You don't seem like someone who needs therapy," Dr. Bennett said during our first session. "Everyone needs it," I replied. "I'm just finally letting myself admit it." We talked about the years of invisibility, the weight of building success in total silence, the strange grief of cutting ties with people who were supposed to love you unconditionally and never did. "Do you regret what you did?" she asked once.
"No," I said, and meant it completely.
"I regret that it had to happen this way. But I don't regret protecting myself." Outside of those sessions, life kept getting better. Northbridge was thriving. We'd replaced the Whitfield contract with 3 smaller, more diversified clients. Marcus got promoted. We hired 4 new people and moved into a bigger office overlooking the harbor. I reconnected with Uncle Theo. We started having dinner once a month. He told me real stories about my mother, not the polished, sanitized versions my father had fed me for years. She'd been fierce, apparently. Stubborn. A fighter. "You're so much like her," he told me once. "She'd be incredibly proud of you." I still keep a photo of my grandmother on my desk. I visit her grave monthly, leave flowers, tell her how things are going. It feels strange talking to a headstone, but it's healing too. "I did it, Grandma," I told her one quiet spring morning. "I didn't let them define me." The wind moved through the cemetery trees, and if I listened closely enough, I could almost hear her voice answering back. "I always knew you would, sweetheart." So here's what I learned, if you're looking for the moral of all this. Your worth was never determined by a degree. It was never determined by your family's opinion of you, or by who chose to believe in you, or who tried their hardest to tear you down. Your worth is determined by what you build when nobody's watching. By who you become when everyone has already counted you out. By the life you create with your own 2 hands, brick by brick, with no one's permission. My father thought he was teaching me a lesson that night at his retirement party. He thought he was finally putting me in my place. What he actually did was set me free. I don't hate my family. That's the part people struggle to believe. Hate takes energy. Hate is its own kind of chain, and I'd rather spend that energy on the people who deserve it, on work I actually believe in, on relationships that nourish me instead of hollowing me out, on a life that is unmistakably entirely mine. Boundaries were never about revenge. They're about protection. They're about finally being able to say, "This is where my life begins, and your damage ends." If you're in a family that makes you feel small, if there are people in your life who see your potential as a threat instead of a gift, if you've ever been the scapegoat, the disappointment, the invisible one sitting quietly at the back table, I see you. I've been exactly where you are. And I promise you, there is a whole life waiting on the other side of walking away. Thank you for staying with me through this one. If it meant something to you, subscribe, ring the bell, and stick around. There are more stories like this one waiting. And remember, you are not what they said you were. You never were. You are so much more than that. Until next time, this is Vanessa, and for the first time in a long while, I'm finally free.